sometimes there are questions that don't get asked that maybe would help if they were, and others that get asked that you go, was that really beneficial a question? These are questions that fit in both categories, if you ask me. And they're ones that I often hear and I'm thinking about when I talk about the 5 soul groups and nuVolutions and this whole experience of living on the edge of creation. The questions: why us? Why now? Welcome to nuVolutions. I'm Tambra Harck, your host and creator of nuVolutions podcast, and together we explore and experience what it means to be living on the edge of creation. I'm really honored you're here. Listen, if you've self-identified with the 5 soul groups, even in some small way, the why us and why now may be questions that you're taking into your own meditation, into your own contemplation, into your own decision-making, into your life. And I think that they're beneficial as well for us to look at in ways that have us see ourselves as a whole and as individuals. And I think that they're funny, almost unnecessary questions because there's a way in which they're answered the minute they're asked. And I think that it might be fun to explore together. Why us? Why now? I've put together a little bit of why I've seen and see now. Why us? Why now? But I bet you'll have more answers than I include in today's episode for nuVolutions, and I hope you'll share them with me and with our global community. All right, so why us? Why now? Why the 5 soul groups? Why humanitarian visionaries? Why dedication to consciousness and sustainability? Why the emergent feminine and integration with masculine? Why healers, teachers, artists? Why millennials and the worldview of the millennial? Why does that mix, individually or separately, make us up as an us? Why us? Why are we seeing more and more people self-identify in these categories? I got to tell you that when I tell people in person about these 5 soul groups, or they've listened to the first episodes and they've come back and contacted me about it, I love hearing the orientations about, wow, I just started to see this, or I've been thinking these thoughts for many, many years, but nobody else was talking about it, or this is a new conversation, or like these are the things that people bring to me. So I know in the why us that there is an us. And it might just be helpful to walk through a few why us's. But let's start with the why now. Why this idea that there's a world to save or a world to change, both of which I don't really agree with as statements. But why that kind of messaging is so predominant right now? Why are we seeing such upheaval, such chaos, such fear, such tyranny? Why are we seeing like the extremes of the things that seem like the horrors of humanity? And at the same time, seeing exponential growth and contribution and philanthropy, which is another episode you can find here on nuVolutions, that these things seem like they may be worlds apart, and yet they're all happening simultaneously. So the why now is that all these things, all of life is happening simultaneously. We are emerging from a particular way of perceiving ourselves in life, in this universe, on this planet, in our families, in ourselves in ways that have not been seen or experienced by a multitude of people in the past. So let's take an example with, in the last 100 years or so, we've been exposed to psychologies, various schools of psychology. One of my preferences and delights in the world of psychology stems through the work of Carl Jung and others who have taken that insight into the collective unconscious, the individual unconscious, consciousness, and bridging the perspective with spirituality. That's been one of my own personal orientations. But psychology is so much bigger than Carl Jung, of course, and more than in what any one person brought. But that perspective of being able to see ourselves and each other, not for diagnoses, not for cures, not for healing even, but rather than to say that we can see our inner workings as something being far more rich and complex and integrated than perhaps most of humanity ever had the opportunity to consider. Ever in all of time. Why now? That's a big reason why. We have, even just in the last 100+ years, exposure to a way of seeing and thinking about ourselves in the play of life in a much more profound way. Another example of why now that kind of fits in that category is that practices like meditation have been around for a very, very long time. They may not have always been called meditation. But I'll tell you, in the last 30 to 60 years, the exposure that we have on the planet to various forms of meditation and trance and contemplative being is, again, practiced by more people than have ever experienced before. And I won't even say that because there are more people on the planet. Of course, it's by more people, but by a greater percentage than had ever been before. And why does that matter? Well, if you're a meditator, you probably already have a sense that there's a way that meditation can be about the meditator. But, honey, meditation is about something so much more than just the one person getting away from the habituation of thought. Many practices of meditation actually have nothing to do with getting away from or stilling the mind. I don't think we ever get away from our mind. That would be unnecessary, and thinking is one of our great gifts. So there are also a lot of misperceptions, as I just exampled, about meditation. Yet there are more people who have had the practice of meditating in the last 30 to 60 years, and that raises our frequency, individually and collectively. If you are a meditator and you've had both the practice of meditating by yourself and meditating with a group of people, you can probably attest to what a very different experience it is. I'm still on the why now. Our experience of being interconnected is connecting is related to that experience of meditation, and it's relating to our interconnectedness. My computer's sitting right here, my phone, like the things that we are connecting like this, our interconnectedness, that the technologies are allowing us to make real. that didn't exist to a big degree even 10 years ago, certainly not 30 years ago, and were the stories of sci-fi 50 and 60 years ago. This is recent history in humanity that we can do and have the experiences of being connected to, talking to, seeing each other from around the world at our will, at our choice. That is a significant part of why now. But even that wouldn't matter in the same way relative to nuVolutions if we didn't have the governing principles, what I call the profound principles that are joining us or bringing us into more clarity and more clear expression of our contribution, of our new, perhaps, definition of responsibility, of our individuality and our connectedness, of our participation in both Newtonian, like, hey, this is real, gravity's real, we live in material bodies, things take time, like that Newtonian approach, and the quantum, everything exists simultaneously at all times, and there is no time. And in all space, and there is no space. That kind of physics as well, that they're both becoming available to us to comprehend as best our minds can, and our engagement with what we perceive to be real can allow. These are conversations that would have been had in very small groups among very few people on the planet in any time throughout all of history. And now these are the kinds of topics and conversations and experiences that are being shared daily among people all around the planet. I know because I'm privy to many of them. I hear from people who say, I'm wanting this conversation and I'm having this conversation. And thank you for bringing the conversation. But it's more than talk, right? Like, conversation is important. Our connectedness and our ability to see, witness, contribute, be contributed to, yes, so important. And that's a part of why now, is that we are in this precipice time of, while technology leads us to be able to be anywhere, anytime, and not have to be in the same room with one another, when we are in the presence of another beating heart, when we can make flesh-to-flesh contact, honoring that we have profound principles that are underpinning our time here, our limited, short, a bit of time that's also an eternity. But not in this body. In this time and space, we have a limited amount of time. And that's part of why now. One of the things that I've personally played with, danced with, challenged myself with, is that sense of urgency. That sense that we have to do something about what's happening in the world right now. Or I have to heal or fix or stop or undo or like something right now. My clients have often come to me with that, that demand that it's right now as well. And while it is now, like, I think nuVolutions could have also been called nowism, that while it is about right now, this is also as urgent as it is present. Our urgency can have us want to thrust ourselves into changing, fixing, finding the solution to a problem. And often that kind of response is coming from a state of fear. So that brings me to another why now. So here's an interesting thing. You've probably heard that we all have in our brains a part of our brain that is the most basal animal, right? Your lizard brain, it's often referred to as, that really knows that basic animal survival experience. I need to eat. I need to be safe. I need to protect myself. I need to provide for my immediacy. I need to reproduce. Like basic. And so much about what about being a human being is that. And our why now is so much more than that. Our why now is like if we're going to talk about the brain, is the neurosciences are showing us so much more. We are compelled by and propelled by so much more than the lizard brain and our induction to fear. That when you focus on love, your personal interpretation and experience of profound and real love, when you experience visceral pleasure, when you, for me, it's very much about being in the breath, in the presence, in the expansion of and subtlety of my own bodied experience. I know that my brain, I love this because the neurosciences are telling us that it's true, but our brains, when we're creating those experiences and become present for them, are lighting up with new measures of connection that aren't about the habituated, conditioned experiences of fear. You are more than that which you fear. And I'm sure you know that. And because we're living in this time of this kind of connectedness, we are also open to a much greater channel of things that can bombard us with fear-inducing responses, whether it's marketing, advertising, focus on the pain kind of approaches, or other forms of media like the way the news or an election is going, or you name it, or your concerns about the well-being of another. Fear is real. But let's reserve our responses to fear to those that we can also bring in consciousness of love and of connectedness. And I say all this not to preach it, but rather to say I am witnessing that such practices are prevalent around the planet today. That is another reason why now. I'm going to take a quick look at my notes and see if there's anything about the why now. Here's an interesting thing. So 25 years ago, I can remember being on the phone and talking to people about the experience of being called. That that term used to refer primarily to being called to serve in a particular way, usually in relationship to religion, actually. But I wasn't talking about it from there. I was talking about that experience that I'd carried since childhood of knowing that my life was here to be a part of something bigger than me, that didn't yet exist, and I didn't yet have the words to describe it, and I in many ways still don't, because we're creating it as we're living it. But I remember talking about this experience of being called, of being of service, of allowing the values of my soul to, and the yearnings of my soul to also be to pave the way for the choices I would make in everything. Now, I can remember being on the phone And back then we had handheld phones tied to a cord, if you can recall. And I can remember sitting there in my San Francisco apartment talking to people who, in many cases, would say, I don't know what that is. I don't know what it means to be called. I don't know what it is to listen to my soul. I don't know what it is to have to be present for a profound longing or yearning. Good for you. I see it in you, but I don't know what that is. And some of that was in response to my being perhaps fumbling around in how to communicate something that felt so profoundly necessary for me to speak of. But now, let me say this, the rest of that sentence is, but a lot of it also had to do with many of the people I was talking to didn't really resonate with that at the time. Now, I bring that same idea. Now I'm more practiced at talking about it and facilitating it in others, and have been working with tens of thousands of people in this very vein for a long time. But now there are people talking about having a sense of a calling and responding to that calling and seeing their soul as some connection between divine and mortal, and that our souls can lead the way and help us pave the path. That what had seemed like an untimely message 25 years ago is prevalent today. I don't know if these are experiences and conversations you're having, but my guess is that if you recognize yourself among the 5 soul groups, there's probably something about that very thing, that sense of having an understanding, perhaps, a deep knowing that there's a way in which how you live your life and that you're living your life today matters to life and to the future of and the now of humanity. This is not a perspective that has been held by a great number of people at any one time in all of time, as best I know. Looking at literature, looking at world religions, we cannot see a trace going back thousands upon thousands of years where this has been prevalent the way it is today. Why now? Hey, honey, it's today. That's why now. So I could just say to the question, why now? I could say, who knows? Who cares? It's just true. Now. And I think it's really beneficial to see ourselves in the scope of this huge system of life. So those are some of the experiences and stories that I have about why now. I bet I could come up with millions more, like the Age of Aquarius and decades of human potential and consciousness work being done. And, I talked a little bit about quantum physics and neurosciences, but man, the work that's being done in those realms, wow, amazing. And one other thing I want to say about that is that there was a book published about 12, 15 years ago called Cultural Creatives by Paul Ray and Sherry Anderson. And while they were looking at sociology in a particular way, and many people received that book and the content that was in it from a perspective of how do we market, how do we identify a new segment of the buying public, which I think really missed the point. Just you might see my eyes rolling a little bit. That I think that was a glimpse into an aspect of what we're now seeing as the 5 soul groups of visionary humanitarians, those dedicated to consciousness and sustainability, to the emergent feminine embodied in women and men, and the integration with a higher vibration or frequency of the masculine. That's group 3. Group 4 is artists, healers, teachers. Love them, love us, and millennials, both by age and by an experience of awakening. And these 5 soul groups might be, if you ever looked at a copy of that book or read any of the articles about cultural creatives, you might see a resonance here. And we're coming into a clearer and more expansive expression of who we are. Which brings me to why us? Or maybe we've already said. I think that the why us question is that if you have a sense that how you work can be influenced by love, and that the act of what you do in your work in the world, if you are bringing yourself to that work, knowing that you can be an expression of love in the way that you serve, what happens in you? Why us? We have the capacity to do that. That's why us. Why us? It's that those of us who self-identify among the 5 soul groups of nuVolutions are responding to something resonant with our own individual souls and who we are collectively, both individually and together, because we are in this together. However we come out of it, we're in it together on our own. Which is an episode that we'll be doing soon. I'm really spending some time preparing for a conversation about aloneness and belonging. I know that it's one of the things that many who self-identify with the 5 soul groups, or any one of them, this internal and external dance of aloneness and belonging is one that that's really asking for our attention. So we have an upcoming episode on that very topic. Until then, and other opportunities for us to join together, I am grateful for your life. I'm grateful for you. And I'm grateful for your time and sharing it with me today. Until next time, be well. You'll find more episodes of nuVolutions on iTunes, where you can subscribe to the show. You can also share any episode with someone in your life. And I welcome your comments. I look forward to continuing the conversation with you.